Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Janet Barlow, and I'm the Executive Director of Hike Nova Scotia. And thanks for joining us for our Mental Health and Trails webinar. This is offered as part of the Trail Sector Capacity Building Project through Hike Nova Scotia, and it's part of our Trail Builders Network. And it is supported by the Nova Scotia Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, also known as CCTH. The Trail Builders Network is our capacity building hub for trail groups, First Nations, and municipalities that build and maintain hiking trails. We represent the largest group of trail users, and we represent trail building groups. Hike NS was approached by CCTH back in the fall to spearhead this project because they see, as we've seen as well, that many trail groups are struggling to keep their organizations afloat. Volunteers are hard to find, they're aging out, and folks who just want to build and maintain trail, for them, some of this work can be challenging. So we hope this webinar series will be of help and of use, and it is for all groups in the trail sector. I do want to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, which is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And I always note that the Mi'kmaq were the very first hikers, and there are some trails in this province that are literally thousands of years old. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. So this will be about an hour and a half in total. You can ask questions throughout, so just raise your hand whether your video is on or off, or use one of the emojis, and you can find those at the bottom of your screen. And you can also write questions in the chat box. So we will be monitoring those throughout. If you have any technical problems, there is a troubleshooting link in your confirmation email. There's also the settings icon on your Zoom application. And you can also call in if you're having trouble with audio. And I just ask that you keep muted when you're not talking, just to cut down on background noise. And so before we get started, I do want to tell you a little bit about Hike Nova Scotia. I promise it'll be quick, especially for those of you who have heard this before. So Hike Nova Scotia, we are a provincial nonprofit, and we're just all about trying to get people out onto the trails and hiking. So building that hiking culture throughout the province. So we strive to be the voice for those who hike, walk, and snowshoe, as well as those who build and maintain hiking trails. And we're just all about promotion, education, and just encouraging people to get out there. So we do this in a number of ways. We offer our seasonal guided hike and walk series. We have our NS Walks walking group program. We have our hiking summit, the annual conference festival, actually coming up May 30th to June 1st in Bridgewater this year. We offer a number of skill building in-person courses as well as webinars. We promote the International Appalachian Trail in the province. We have our Hiker Challenge where you can earn badges, and we have our Young Hikers Club, and of course the Trail Builders Network. And we are member-based, and paid members get lots of perks and discounts. We also have a website and social media that are really great resources for hiking and trail information and events. So then just, as part of our capacity building webinar series, just wanted to let you know that we do have a number of recordings available for the webinars we've held so far. So this list at the top here, you can just go into our website and you can re-watch those videos. This one tonight will also go up there soon. And then we have one coming up on May 21st on volunteer recruitment and retention. So you can register for the live, or you can wait for the recording to come on. And just a tip for those of you who might be interested, we have our Trail Support Coordinator project. May 12th is the deadline to apply to get some support from one of our two summer trail support coordinators. So that's mainly online support to help you improve your communications, promote volunteerism, and so on. So May 12th is that deadline. Okay, now for the good stuff, why you are here. So I want to introduce, and I also want to thank Glenn Rogers and Will Brunner for coming out tonight and facilitating the webinar. So Glenn is the Education and Training Coordinator with the Canadian Mental Health Association Nova Scotia Division. Want to give a wave there, Glenn? And Will Brunner is the owner of Soft Pine Wellness, which offers nature therapy and guiding experience in Nova Scotia. And there's Will. So thanks both of you for coming out, and maybe what we can do, just so you know who else is around the virtual table, we will I'll go down my list and I'll prompt folks who are attending, and maybe you can just say your name, your organization, and maybe where you're located tonight. So first I have Claudine.
Hey there, I'm Claudine. I'm with the Executive Director of the Nova Scotia Off-Road Riders Association, and I actually have met Will before. You probably don't remember, I met you first at Trout Point Lodge. I think you did a session there, and then I've seen you at the Wolfville Farmers Market.
You look familiar. That's really great. Great to see you again.
Thanks for
Good.
coming, Claudine. Great to see you. And yes, it's a small world, isn't it?
Yep.
Great. And Darlene. Oh,
Hello, I'm Darlene Proctor, and I am located in Antigonish County with the Cape George Heritage Hiking Trails.
great. Thanks. And I have Doug next.
There I am. Doug Leone, from Cape Breton with Cox Heath Hills Wilderness Recreation Association.
Great. Thanks.
Is that the Highlands behind you?
Yeah, I can't remember. This is either Aspy Bay or North River. I can't remember.
Okay.
Doug and Holly.
Holly, I'm in the dark. Oh dear. Oh well. Um, I'm involved in everything to do with hiking, parks, and trails for decades and decades now. And that's about all I'm going to say.
You could say more. She's done a lot. Hi, Holly. And Joanna.
Hi, everyone. I'm part of the Nanaimo River Trails Association. We're located out in the infield Nanaimo River area, just north of the Halifax Stanfield International Airport.
It's great, great trail system there. Thanks. And Michelle.
Cheryl Richards in Bedeque, Cape Breton. I'm a board member with Hike Nova Scotia, and I'm also the regional physical activity consultant in Cape Breton.
Hi. Nadine. Oh, Nadine, unmute. Maybe. Oh, there.
There we go.
There you
Nope,
go.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, it won't let me turn my
Nope.
sorry about that. It won't let me turn my camera on. I am in Sydney, in Westmount actually, and I am out for a walk because I figured you would forgive me for not sitting in front of my laptop at this hour of the day on a nice afternoon. I work with Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources, and I also volunteer with Cox Heath Hills as well.
Wonderful, Nadine. Thanks for being in an active way on this. That's great.
Maybe we should all go outside and
Yeah. And
get
Suze?
the
Hi, everyone. I'm Suze. I'm new to Nova Scotia. I've only been here for a couple of years now, and I'm trying to get involved in Hike Nova Scotia a little bit more. I'm not involved in an organization per se, but I am working towards doing that and have a huge interest in mental health and how nature works well with that. And I'm just really interested to hear, what you guys are doing with that.
Great. Well, thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Good to meet everyone. All right, so thanks for sharing, and yeah, I'll hand it over to Will and Glenn, and they will dazzle you.
Wow, there's the pressure.
That was my intention. It's all going to be dazzle this evening.
You want to go ahead, Will?
Yeah. Do you have the slides up or?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, did you want to just say anything else about yourself or?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Well, as Janet said, I'm Will Brunner. I'm in the Annapolis Valley, just outside Greenwood, so near the Air Force Base, but right across the road from the McMaster Mill Historic Park and the Crystal Falls Trail, if anyone's familiar. And I've done environmental conservation work for a long time, and then I switched to wilderness-based mental health counseling, and then I found nature therapy about 4 or 5 years ago, and that's when I created my business, Soft Pine Wellness, and I do stuff that I'm going to talk about more later, so I'll save that for now.
Thanks, Will. Good evening, everyone. My name is Glenn Rogers, and like Janet said, I am one of the education and training coordinators with Canadian Mental Health Association, the Nova Scotia division. My background is education. I trained as an elementary school teacher and did that for a number of years until my mental health took a bit of a nosedive, and I decided the classroom was not the place for me. So since that time, I've sort of traced back that my mental health, my depression began when I was probably 13 years old. So it has been the majority of my life. And I know some of you are saying it's probably only been about 5 years since, maybe 10 at the most since I was 13, but nope, not the case. So anyway, yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. It's kind of a different role for me. We've had Hike Nova Scotia come in and do some presentations for our participants a couple of times, and it's nice to be here on the delivery end. So thanks for having us, Janet. Give me a second here, and I will get
Great to have you.
we'll get things started.
And Glenn and I have co-created this, so we're gonna kind of pivot back and forth, but we'll probably pop in ideas and things here and there. And as Janet mentioned as well, like definitely feel free to raise your hand or use the emoji hand raise or questions in the chat while we're going. Glenn and I are both happy to be discussing as much as we're facilitating. As Glenn said, we're not the only people with knowledge in this room, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. My thought is that we're all teachers and we can all learn from one another. So please feel free to share your experiences. So, okay. So tonight we're talking about mental health and trails. It's brought to you by Hike Nova Scotia, CMHA Nova Scotia, and Soft Pine Wellness. Table of contents. This is what we hope to we hope to cover tonight. So we're the main focus is mental health and nature, the connection between the two, why it is important for us as individuals to spend time in nature, what can nature do for our mental health, and how do we make that connection between our busy, nonstop lives and taking the time to make sure we interact with nature on a regular basis.
And Janet did do a lovely land acknowledgement, but and I wasn't sure if that she would, but when I do mine, I often refer to this website, Mi'kmaq Place Names Atlas. If you're not familiar with that, it's a really great resource to find names of different places, and not just towns and villages, but harbors and points and mountains and rivers, and you can click on them, and there's a little audio track that will speak the name in the Mi'kmaq language. And I've clicked on here for the Annapolis River, which is kind of the the watershed that I'm in, and I like to think about place from that perspective. and I'm here in the Annapolis River, which is in Mi'kmaq, Dewapskik, which means, I think I always have this a bit wrong, water flowing between rocks. And when we're talking about, for me, doing nature-based work, thinking about humans' relationships with nature and bringing our communities and our people, more into relationship with nature and the natural world through hiking and other activities. We have a lot to learn from Indigenous folks, and especially in our area, from the Mi'kmaq people. I think there's a bit more on that on the next slide. Yeah, so there's this concept, two concepts. The first one is Edawaptimunk, and sometimes the T's sound like D's and the P's sometimes sound like B's. But I've been practicing my pronunciation, and I may be getting them wrong still, but Edawaptimunk means two-eyed seeing, and this is from Elder Albert Marshall in Cape Breton, and that symbol in the middle of the slide with the two eyes is really representing how Western and scientific perspectives combined with Indigenous perspectives and Mi'kmaq perspectives here in a way that's not in opposition to each other, but ways that those perspectives can complement and just really strengthen our understanding of life around sustainability and how we, are living on this earth. And we know that hasn't gone the greatest in our past, and we're, trying to reconcile that a little bit, which leads into the second term, which is Nadugalimk. And I think I've said that a lot. I've done a lot of environmental education as well. And there's 4 R's to Nadugalimk, and Nadugalimk kind of is like the Mi'kmaq term. Before we had words like sustainability, Mi'kmaq had Nadugalimk, and it's really just this way of being in relationship to the land. And there's 4 R's to Nadugalimk, one of which is relationship, but there's also responsibility. So there's that ownership and that 7 generations, really ensuring that we're leaving the land, healthy and available for future generations. Reciprocity, again, like that back and forth and give and take, having that mutual relationship again. And then respect, really recognizing, all beings and all places and creatures as, humans equals, and really looking at nature on the same level of respect and value as humans. So I really appreciate that the Mi'kmaq tradition and Mi'kmaq people do have these really awesome and really important and empowering perspectives that helps us think about how we're mending those relationships to nature. What I think most of us in the room are at least somewhat into that. So yeah.
But I think it's kind of neat that you can probably go to any country in the world and learn about the Indigenous people, and I think we can probably come to the conclusion that they were the original environmentalists. That the environment, nature, was a huge part of their life, and they took those 4 R's to a new level, and held them as part of their value system. So kind of cool. So the first little bit, we're going to be looking at what spending time in nature can do for our mental health and our well-being just in general. The focus is mental health, but as we all know, our mental health and our physical health are so interconnected that it's hard to separate the two. So I think most of the evening we'll be talking, you'll probably use the term mental health, but we are referring to our physical as well. So these are some of the benefits that, we doing research for this whole thing. These are some of the things that really kind of stood out to us as being important to recognize. Spending time in nature, this is how we can benefit from it. There's a study, and I should say you'll get a PDF copy of all these slides, and there is a resource list at the end of it. So if you want to do some of your own research a little later, you'll have access to that as well. there was a study done in 2022, I believe, that indicated that even just a few minutes spent in nature, and I believe they said, 1 to 10 minutes in nature can begin to improve and benefit our attention span. So, it doesn't have to be a lot. We don't have to, make a weekend of it and set aside, hours of time. It can be just small periods of time whenever we get the chance that we can start to see benefits. Research shows that time spent in nature can also help limit the symptoms of ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So, people who are living with that disorder, spending time in nature can help to calm and lessen. It's not going to cure, it's not going to get rid of, but it can help to, as a control sort of tool for those individuals. Self-regulation, it makes us feel happier, calmer, and therefore, we're able to handle difficult situations in a more positive way. We may not be as reactive as we were if we were, just dealing with our daily office lives, or, the commute home in traffic, that sort of thing. So if you're feeling a little out of control and, just, feel like you want to snap all the time, or you want to toot your horn constantly in traffic, get yourself out into nature for a little bit, and hopefully you'll see some improvement there. Stress is another area. Nature can definitely lessen the impact of stress and the stress hormones, cortisol in particular. So, when people find that they are stressed, as I mentioned, in traffic or wherever it is, you're waiting in the line at the grocery store, get away from that if you can, get out into nature, and hopefully you'll see some of that cortisol start to dissipate in our lives. And then the last one is that social connection factor. A lot of us like to spend time in nature by ourselves, but if we can spend time in nature with other people, i.e., or one of your hike groups, that sort of thing, or friends and family, I think we're going to see sort of added benefits, or total. What am I trying to say here? We're going to. What's that? Sorry.
Cumulative benefits.
Yes, thank you, Will. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to see a buildup of different effects and benefits throughout that. So, getting out into nature sometimes by ourselves is great. We need that. We need just time to do nothing. But it's also a great idea to include others that in our time out in nature.
Yeah, and in addition to with the mood. Glenn mentioned attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There's a lot of research that says time in nature, being outdoors, reduces depression levels as well. And a lot of that stuff is related. Some of the research from Japan, where forest bathing was first created, and the nature therapy that I do, blood pressure goes down, heart rate variability, which is a good thing, that goes up, and our stress hormones go down. And a lot of that is a direct direct effect from time in nature. But in general, we get this from other things too when we're practicing, self-care and other things that help regulate our nervous system. We're getting out of that fight, flight, freeze response and back into that rest and digest. So a lot of that stuff can kind of fit in there, but there's also individual kind of phenomenon happening too.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Will. We have a little video now. I always like to try and add some videos because there are so many people in the world that can speak to some of the stuff we're talking about in a better way than I can. So it's nice to have a video. So this is a gentleman. It's a PBS series. I think it's called America Outdoors with Baratunde Thurston. He is an author, researcher, just a kind of a neat guy. I've watched a few of his different videos. This one is about the effects of spending time in nature on the human brain. There was a study done at the University of Utah that really, spent a lot of time looking at this topic. We're going to kind of skip through the first little bit and get to about halfway, but just before we start, what happens in the first part of the video is he's sitting in a lab, white walls, everything is white around him, and he's asked to count down from 1,000 by sevens backwards. I think he talks about it in the second part of the video. So you'll just bear with me. Oh, it was 3:15, wasn't it, Will?
2:46, I think.
2:46.
Brain has to do if you're driving in heavy traffic or dealing with too much screen time. You know, modern life.
All right, good job. You can stop now.
Wow, that was horrible.
Are you ready to get out of this lab?
I am so ready to get out of this lab.
Awesome.
Are you sure you're not doing another experiment where you just wire people up and send them off into the park?
And see how self-conscious they are?
Now this is a new experience. Walking around Red Butte Garden with a sci-fi swimming cap over my head and what looks like a child's backpack. Thank God I have this sign on my back, because I know whoever sees me is gonna have some questions. But in the name of science, I relax. The pastoral settings take over. The grass, the trees, the fields. There's even a little babbling brook. For a moment, I forget we're conducting an experiment. But before I know it, it's back to the beige lab to complete the after portion of this test. Thankfully, this time, I don't have to do any math. And boom, I've contributed to the study of neuroscience and the outdoors.
I'm just gonna peel this off your head. It's a little gross feeling, but sweet relief underneath.
Yeah.
How's that feel?
Oh, my brain can breathe again.
Right?
That's nice. But still, I've got a few questions about her work. What was the point of having me count backwards from 1,000? Was that just for fun for you, or was there a scientific purpose
just
to that?
pure evil. Constantly running from one thing to the next, answering emails, text messages.
Yeah.
It's thought that that's very depleting for your cognition.
I can guarantee you it's depleting for my cognition.
Yeah, and so that was our way of, in the lab, depleting you so that you go into your walk depleted, so that we can see if you are restored. Being in nature, because there aren't as many attentional demands placed on you at any given moment, that your attention networks are able to really rest and recuperate when you're in nature.
So I know you don't have time to fully analyze my results, but you've done this with a number of other people. What have you learned from your other study subjects?
Yeah, so the protocol that you did.
Here's what Amy and her colleagues have learned. After having your brain stressed out and tired from all that math, a walk in the garden returns your brain to a calmer state. The important thing is that this restoration is greater after a walk in nature than a similar walk in an urban setting. Yeah, I'm excited by the results of this validating what a lot of humans already feel. And I hope it does go beyond that to policies. Giving people access to trees, real green things, is going to help us all, be healthier. Amy, I want to thank you for bringing me into your lab, but most importantly, for releasing me from your lab into this beautiful garden and showing me some of what you're learning formally that a lot of us have felt and known informally about the effect of nature on our bodies and our brains. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate you letting me put brain cap on you and be my lab rat.
Thanks for watching. For more tales from the great outdoors, check out Season 2 of America Outdoors.
Any thoughts or comments?
I will say he noted, well, that the research showed stronger impacts, positive impacts to our brains in a natural setting versus an urban one. That definitely mimics a lot of the original forest bathing, nature therapy research in Japan. They compared urban parks, so still kind of nature, but in urban settings, and then more wilderness. And they did notice some changes in people's blood pressure, cortisol levels, and their moods. But they noted that those changes are much more significant and last longer in our bodies when it gets more of a wild setting.
Right. Yeah. No, I just thought it was kind of neat that, you know, it sort of brings in that science, and, you know, a lot of us, we don't think about it, I think, in that sort of way. We, you know, we're so busy that a lot of us don't even, you know, take the time to get out. And I think I have been guilty of that in a certain period of my life, but I'm not a winter person. So when winter hits, I like to sort of hibernate, but I try and force myself to get out and, you know, go for a walk, spend some time out in nature, just to you know, to enjoy it, to break the habit, break the darkness of the winter. And what I found is, you know, it doesn't take me very long to be outside before I'm, you know, I feel a little more relaxed, and I actually start to enjoy my time. So, you know, I've been trying to incorporate more wilderness into my own life. I love the ocean. Anytime I get to go to the ocean, you know, I feel huge benefits from that. Going for a stroll can really lift my mood. So, whoop, what do we have? My slides are not working. Bear with me, folks. There we go. I don't know if anyone has heard of this Parks Prescription, or PARX. It is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it started in the States, Will.
Yeah.
And it has been picked up. BC Parks have really picked up on this initiative, and they've sort of connected with a lot of healthcare practitioners in the province. And, you know, Will, again, you know, add to this if I'm missing anything. But I think the idea behind it is, you know, much like prescribing medication or, you know, therapy for patients, doctors and professional healthcare professionals are prescribing, you know, time in nature as a way of helping to cope with some of the illnesses and the ailments and the things that we are afflicted with on a daily basis. And some of the benefits that come from this are listed here. You know, 1 to 10 minutes, I think I already mentioned, of exposure to nature can have a pretty significant impact on our mental health and calming us. You know, reducing some of those stressors on our lives. We talked about the ADHD thing. 20 to 30 minutes, I think, is sort of an optimal time if we want to see a good reduction in our cortisol levels. And I think, you know, when we think of cortisol, I've done some research that says a 15-minute dump of cortisol in our bodies takes about an hour for us to get rid of it. So if we're in, you know, a continual state of stress, or we're stressed, you know, a lot, it's almost like we're trying constantly to get rid of it, and it's hard to get rid of that. So if we can build in, you know, 20-30 minutes a day or every other day, and help to reduce that cortisol, that's going to go a long way to, you know, to protect us from the negative effects. And as we know, stress is bad for our mental health, but it can also lead to a lot of other physical ailments, high blood pressure, heart disease, you know, obesity. So that's just another reason for us to get outside and tune into nature. And then the last bullet there says 2 hours a week is sort of the optimum, is what they recommend. That if you can, find 2 hours in your week to get out in nature and break it up. It doesn't have to be 2 hours, at a shot, but just get out and spend some quality time in nature will really show some improvements for your mental health.
And that 20, sorry, Glenn, that 20 to 30 minutes, that's right from the research. And they just saw cortisol levels will continue dropping after 30 minutes, but you get a really big drop off in the first 20 to 30 minutes. And then a separate research found that 2 hours a week is a good and realistic amount for people. So within the Parks prescription, which is in BC Parks, did kind of bring it to Canada, and they kind of manage and hold the Parks prescription program, but it is across Canada. So we do have some physicians, I think it's the Physicians Association of Nova Scotia, kind of endorsed it. Also the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. So within the Parks program, it is in our province, but it's slow. It's very new. But might be something that if you do know folks in the healthcare system in your area, or doctors, it might be interesting to know if there are doctors that might be, in your region that are actively prescribing nature, or perhaps they want to, and they can essentially sign up. Sometimes patients can receive a free pass to Parks Canada, the National Park Pass. If you're not near a national park, then it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But yeah, and then so the 20 minutes at a time and 2 hours a week is kind of the official, I call it the dose of nature. That's what they're looking at as far as the Parks prescriptions.
Yep. So yeah, the next time, if you're lucky enough to have a family doctor, the next time you go, talk to them about that. And if they're not involved, maybe encourage them to look into it. So.
Yeah, so I'm going to take over a bit and talk a bit more about some of this stuff. So as I was developing and making the connections between time and nature and how we do that and health, I realized that there's this large kind of grouping of different activities called nature-based interventions, and they're all different types of activities that can all contribute to health and well-being. So it's not just about hiking. It's not just about the more mindful forest bathing activities that I do, but it's a whole suite of activities that, when done in an intentional way to help people receive those benefits, like with a bit of mindfulness or slowing down, or really helping people use their senses and really notice what's around them, can have these really strong impacts. So generally it's super cost effective and patient led, because it's not about medication. It's not about radical surgeries or other things like that. It's much more of a kind of a holistic and organic type of approach, and it's also a form of promotion, prevention, and treatment. So it's preventative. It helps, there's a lot of education around that, kind of like what we're doing today, but definitely for treatment as well. I think even back in, before the Industrial Revolution and the science age, doctors used to prescribe people to go to the seashore to heal, or this person needs some fresh air. So there was, it wasn't that they didn't know what they were doing. There was some, legitimacy to this. But within nature-based interventions, I think specifically for you folks, working on and trying to find ways to support equitable access to parks, trails, natural environments. And the equitable access is key, right? Because not everybody has a vehicle. Some trails aren't super accessible, and I'm sure you folks are all super familiar with that. And other ways to open the doors, even wider for different demographics and different people to use those natural spaces. A lot of that is education as well, right? So there's a lot of just building awareness, and I know you're all probably working on that too. But maybe thinking about different demographics in your community that would directly benefit from that. That's certainly what I'm trying to do where I am. And Glenn mentioned the socializing and connection benefits. There's a lot of health and well-being impacts that just come from connecting with new people, meeting people of different ages, meeting folks with like-minded, perspectives on things. I do a lot of climate sharing spaces around climate change, and it's the science around that is really just allowing folks to be able to, just connect and communicate and feel, heard and understood by people. So there's a lot of strong things that can be packaged within a nature-based intervention, like, a health-based activity on a trail, for example. So. Next slide. Okay, so we'll get even deeper into that now. Supporting these benefits. So, like, we know the science. How do we do that stuff? So, inviting trail users to explore the health and well-being. And the next slide, I'm gonna go over some like tips and tricks and some ideas around what does that look like. But bringing a mental health perspective, bringing a little bit of helping people feel embodied and paying attention to their surroundings, using their senses, maybe, walking a little bit slower. That's when a lot of these health benefits come in. Of course, just being outdoors and getting physical activity, we get that. There's the mental and physical health benefits for sure. But with nature-based interventions and with a lot of the mental health stuff, a lot of the nature therapy, forest bathing research, it is about letting people slow down and feeling embodied. So really paying attention to our senses. So we can accomplish that, through signage. And I think there's some examples in a few slides around, trails that have done that and really prompting people through signage on trails, programming and activities. So you might be able to help facilitate or lead an activity or a walk that has a mental health or an embodied piece to that. Maybe it's like Qigong or yoga, or maybe it's a bird watching piece, but there are like some, slow and mindful things to that. I went on a night hike the other day, and it was talking about how our eyesight changes and how humans are really dependent on our sight, and we don't really like the darkness. But there was a lot of reflection and mindfulness, and a lot of time for folks to be able to really feel really present in the space that they're in. So lots of ideas around programming and activities. And then education materials, kind of similar to signage, but if your trail group is a group that makes brochures or has a social media presence, just adding that mental health angle to your promotion and talking about your trails. Maybe there's certain places on your trails or in your communities where there are particularly interesting sensory experiences, or like, wow, this look off, or this bridge over this brook, and maybe thinking about how people can enjoy that, and some prompts to ask them to stop and slow down and really notice those places. And we'll get a bit more into that too. That really covers the second point too, sensory or mindfulness prompts. And I do have some examples of that, so I think I'll talk about that a bit more. Cultural traditions of connecting to the land. I don't know that much about. I know some Mi'kmaq perspectives and some words and things, but I imagine that there are probably, if you do have Mi'kmaq or Indigenous folks in your communities, that might be a way of integrating a wellness piece and a mental health and well-being piece to it. I've often seen the medicine wheel talking about the physical, the emotional, the spiritual. There's a fourth one as well. So there's that perspective, and we have more examples to get into with it also. I'll save that as well. And then making it personal. So you might have certain priorities with your trails, whether it's conservation or you're really pushing biking, or I guess we're a hiking group, but different ways that you want people to engage with your trails and with your natural spaces, but also making it personal for the users of the trails. So I find in signage and educational materials, asking people to reflect on, what's a special memory of nature from when I was a child, or how have I known about, conservation issues, or why am I really, passionate about hiking or passionate about ecology or whatever it might be. Kind of going back to the beginning, talking about mending those relationships with nature. It really is all about, we all have our own stories and our own relationship, really. So it's inviting people to consider and reflect on, what role does nature play in their life, and how is that special for them. That can be through signage, that can be through education, it can be through how you're communicating the mental health piece on your trails. I think I'll get more into that in maybe the next slide. So, and I had this image smaller before, but hopefully you can see this. This is just an image of a trail map in the UK, and it's a sensory hike. So you can see maybe some of those shapes. There's a big eyeball on the left. I think it's an ear. In the middle, I can see there's some hands, so some touching. So these are all like sensory stops along a trail. And maybe you're familiar with this. The core of the work that I do with nature therapy and forest bathing does really lie in using our bodies and our senses to make a connection and to be aware of our surroundings, which is really mindfulness at its core. It's paying attention to certain things and specific senses at different times, or basically like the prompt for you to be paying attention to something specific. So if you can think about your trails where there's a brook, maybe it's your sense of hearing. If there's a beautiful hardwood forest, maybe it's your sense of sight and seeing the different colors of green. The Japanese have 4 different words for the way light filters through green leaves in a forest. 4 different kinds of light filtering. So they have words for this. If it's a windy, look off, or a shoreline, maybe it's your sense of smell. If you have a bunch of mossy, rocks or rotting logs, or maybe some massive, white pine trees along the trail, maybe it's sense of touch. Tactile is really, really interesting, especially for kids. It could turn into, like, I do a texture scavenger hunt often with kids too. So just finding out how many different kinds of textures can I find. It can be seasonal as well. So sometimes you have to think about, well, this one is only going to apply to the fall, or this one's only going to apply to the winter. So thinking about ways you can mix that up or be inclusive to the different seasons. But so just inviting people to engage with the trail in certain ways, and that can really help people explore their senses in a way that they may not be used to doing. Often we do some of this stuff on autopilot. We do notice things, of course, but we often miss a lot of things too. So it's really helpful to have these reminders and ask people, hey, maybe at the sense of smell stop, we suggest you sit here for 5 minutes and really try and use your sense of smell. And that's really like, okay, I'm gonna take my time. I'm really gonna pay attention because it sounds like it's gonna be good for me. So.
Yeah, oftentimes even though we're spending time in nature, some of us might rush through it. We feel like it's an experience that, okay, we're here, but now we have to move on. So I like that idea of being intentional and, taking the time to sit for 5 or 10 minutes and just, experience it and let it sort of watch over us. So.
Talking to some park staff and naturalist groups, I've heard that a lot of people love nature. They love to hike, but it's all about getting their steps in. It's all about checking off how many species of birds that they've noticed. It's identifying mushrooms, all of which are great and really cool. And I'm definitely, obviously, like that's lovely. But if we are, like Glenn said, racing through that trail to get those things done, we're using our analytical, right brain. We're thinking more so, and we're not really like disconnecting. And really, it's not really necessarily to know what is this tree species and what are all the cool facts I know about it, but what is it like to just witness this tree? Like, what does its bark feel like? How tall is it? Are there other animals that are living nearby? It's subtle, but it's a totally different way of knowing, and engaging with those plants and animals and places.
Yeah.
So this is Will's nature therapy tips and tricks. So this is a little bit of shop talk in a way, but just some of the things that I use when I do my nature therapy and forest bathing experiences, some of which you're probably familiar with. And the first one, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 senses. Kids do this in school sometimes, and it's really like it's a mindfulness calming technique. What are 5 things you can see? What are 4 things you can touch? What are 3 things you can smell? What are 2 things you can hear? And you usually want to leave the number 1 for the taste, because you don't want to ask people to taste 5 different things in nature, because you're probably going to get in trouble for that. So that's a super simple one that can be done anywhere. But just an example of ways to get people to start exploring the senses. The other numbers don't really matter. I just typically end with the sense of taste. Noticing change in the environment. So I really like doing this when, a forest type changes, or when we go from like a deep, dark spruce forest to the beach or a lake or a river shore. You can imagine your sensory experience. Things will get brighter when you leave the thicket. Things will get maybe windier when you leave the thicket. There'll be more smells, perhaps. Maybe you're leaving some smells behind. So it's really these little subtle things that we probably notice often, but it's really being explicit to ask people and to ask your trail users to notice these things. And the slow walk, this is something I recommend people how to just kind of bring in some nature therapy and mindfulness into their day, but you can do this on the trail as well. And when I do this, I'll typically say, we could probably walk this, 200 meters in, 5 minutes or however long it takes to walk 200 meters. But we're going to do this 200 meters in 20 minutes. And we're going to walk really, really slowly. Maybe there's some prompts around if you have some interesting, textures underneath the feet. People could be noticing that body sensory thing with their feet. You're really just asking them to slow down, and that's all they really have to do. All the other senses and their other observations will kick in. But maybe this is useful for you in your own mental health as well. Sometimes I say, if you have a 5-minute walk to work or to school, maybe you can turn that into 10 minutes. Or if you're walking from your front door to your car or the bus stop and that takes 5 minutes, maybe try and extend that to 10 or 15 minutes if you have the time. It's really finding those little opportunities to bring in those slow and mindful moments. And then I have this quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, really, really great book. She's an indigenous woman from the Northeast United States, but she's also a science teacher. So she has this really awesome perspective. And she's saying in this quote here, "The land is the real teacher. All we need as students is mindfulness. Paying attention is a form of reciprocity with the living world, receiving the gifts with open eyes and open heart." So it's really like that attitude, right? And I love that she's saying attention is a form of reciprocity. Nature is there, it provides so many goods and services, it offers all this enjoyment and our livelihood. But like, as we're saying, when we speed by those special places, we don't notice it. We're not really engaging in that relationship in a back and forth way. And hopefully, you think with your trail associations and your priorities, inviting people to do that richens, like it really fills up their knowledge and their care and their value for those natural places, and perhaps that turns into more volunteers or more folks who are being advocates for the environment or advocates for recreation in your community. So the cornucopia of results is pretty large. And we have another video. You might be familiar with the knowledge path at the Albert Bridge School, but really lovely, and there's some great examples of what we're talking about in there.
Hey Bella, did you hear everyone talking about what's happening at Riverside School? I did. I heard that there's a 2-kilometer interactive path going to be built behind the school in the spring. Yes, it will be called the Knowledge Keepers Path. It's like our school's backyard is offering us a place to explore and learn. Did you know that Mi'kmaq elders will be coming to our school to teach us about their cultures and traditions? Oh wow, cool. Did you also hear that the path will have outdoor musical instruments? Yes, it's going to be called the Sulalagay Sound Garden, which means Odon the Myra Sound Garden. Wouldn't it be great to have our sharing circles outside? That would be really neat. Our sharing circle seats could be made out of tree stumps. I even heard my teacher say we can take our writing outside. We can even write and draw on something called a living canopy. Really? I can't wait to see what a living canopy looks like. Imagine all the things we can learn just from being outside on our path. Yeah, we can also do things like release our butterflies and learn about the plants that are naturally growing. Ooh, and we could do yoga in the outdoor learning space. Won't it be fun to learn from knowledge keepers here at Riverside School? If you want to support our project, please call or email Riverside School.
It's honestly a super cute video made by the students, but they put some really beautiful, sensory and like immersive learning stuff in there. Obviously, more applicable maybe to a school setting, but really simple and innovative ways to ask people to engage with the trail and engage with the space. And when things are built with nature and there's some sensory or there's some expression, creativity, that's all really, really great for folks' mental health. So expanding on trail activities, first point, intentionally connecting with specific beings. So obviously your plants and your animals, bedrock, soil, water, and as far as thinking about sensory experiences and ways you might be able to, help people engage with those things. Like I said, water has a really interesting sense of hearing. Glenn talked about feeling really good at the ocean. There's a lot of science and research into negative ions, which come from like when water is being oxygenated and bubbling, especially salt water, but fresh water definitely does it too. There's some like really kind of magical, but really positive health benefits from being around waterfalls and rivers and creeks that are flowing and that are bubbling up. So you can kind of integrate that health piece to it as well. There's some pretty cool stuff around if you feel comfortable asking people to take off their shoes, if you have a really like mossy or sandy or like a really safe spot. There's also a lot of research around physically grounding our bodies. The UK people, they call it earthing. But there's a belief that we build up kind of excessive energy and ions in our body, and connecting to the earth has some strong health benefits. I think Indigenous folks would probably, say the same thing, that letting our bodies connect with nature in that way. And maybe there's certain conservation, causes or animals or plants in your area, whether it's birds or flora, and thinking about how you might be able to integrate those into a mindfulness activity, or a way to, let's stop and listen. And this is what this, warbler call sounds like. And usually, you spell it out in a funny way. Who cooks for you for owls? So there's an education piece there, but you're asking people to stop and slow down and try and hear that bird. And then they're improving their awareness of that conservation, cause too. I think Nova Scotia is really interesting geologically. Like there's a lot of cool glacial activity and stuff there. So maybe there's something around that that's educational. But rocks are usually pretty fun with our senses and our bodies. Maybe have a piece of bedrock in the sun and asking people to lie down on the rocks on a sunny day because it's like super duper warm, and that could be something really fun as well. It's really just kind of being creative and thinking outside the box around how folks can use and experience the trails in a different way. Obviously, excuse me, still aligning with, being, respectful and careful with the ecology. We're certainly not really encouraging people to, always be harvesting plants or taking leaves and taking things out of nature. But the sensory experience means we get to, have a relationship with it, but we're not, harming it or taking it out. Experiential human legacies and building a sense of place. So maybe thinking about how Mi'kmaq or settler cultures, have used this land in the past, whether it was an old portage or a traveling route, whether there was canals on a river, maybe it was, shipbuilding or, even an industry that might not even be environmentally friendly now, but inviting people to imagine, what the people of that time, how they were living and what might have the environment been like at that time as well. This is getting a bit more into education and a little bit away from the mental health piece, but I think it's really valuable when you can ask people to imagine how themselves and other humans have had relationship with specific places, and thinking about at this look off or on this point or whatever, that there's been a lot of legacy of humans and nature interacting with each other. And maybe that relationship is getting better through time. Generally we are treating the land a lot more friendly than we used to. And I think sense of place is really important as well. When people can feel that stronger connection to nature, they're aware of the positive mental health and well-being benefits that they're receiving. It becomes, more important to them and more valuable. And that builds up their sense of place. Maybe they feel a stronger connection with, the river or the mountain or the shore in their community. And they can seek that. Glenn has, found out through his life that, don't mean to keep picking on you, Glenn, with the ocean thing though.
No, that's fine.
It really, really speaks to it, right? Like we kind of have this, I have a set of waterfalls back where I'm from. And whenever I go there, it's kind of my happy place, and that is my sense of place for that. And it's very meaningful to me, and I always go there, and I know if there's ever, threats or issues to that place or to the ecology or the trail, I'd be right there to advocate for it because it means that much to me. So,
if I could say something there too, I know we're talking about connection, and a lot of times in my own journey with my my depression, my mental health issues, oftentimes I've been lacking or missing that connection or not being able to recognize it. And sometimes going to the ocean allows me to feel, to begin to reconnect, right? To realize that, I'm just a small entity in this big place, but I do matter. So I think for a lot of us, it is about that lack of connection and trying to get it back in our lives. And I think nature is a great way of spending time in nature is a great way of doing that for a lot of people.
I was at Blomidon Provincial Park today with two natural resources staff talking about me doing some forest bathing activities there. And we walked down a very short trail. We didn't have that much time, but just as I was describing how some of these activities go, and they have this certain ownership and love for this park, they were remembering why they loved nature in the first place, just by talking about how, like Glenn said, we might lose that connection or forget about it. A lot of us remember that when we were kids, whether it was an urban backyard or a grandparent's garden or a camp or anything like that. It really is about that remembering, giving people the ability to slow down, to remember. Yeah, and that last point on trail development and stewardship, volunteering. So within the nature-based interventions realm, having volunteers in the community contribute to causes and projects like trails or restoring the environment, or education outdoors. If we can speak to the participants and the people involved in the volunteering or the staff, that what we are doing is good for our mental health and our well-being, just recognizing it. Sometimes us humans, especially adults, need to know that it's been proven. We need to know that there's science so we can believe it and let ourselves engage with that. So a lot of these activities can really contribute to nature-based health and well-being, but we just need to mention it. We need to kind of put that flag up in the air and tell people this is what we're doing. And I tell folks, if after 5 minutes of some mindful breathing or some slow walking, you will probably notice your blood pressure has gone down. You should feel a little bit more calmer. And sometimes it's a fake it till you make it kind of a scenario, but there is that kind of thing in our logic that we need to know that there's proof, so we can kind of believe that it can happen, kind of a thing.
Next.
Yes.
Okay.
And I apologize, folks. There's a lot of me at the end, but
no. This is your area.
So local partnerships, and we have a few slides on this as well. So I mentioned sectors here. So I'm really passionate about, and I know a lot of folks are looking at ways to have programming, caring for the caregivers and vulnerable populations. So if there's, really hardworking teachers or early childhood educators or really hardworking healthcare staff, or vulnerable populations, maybe there's some at-risk youth programming in your community. Seniors as well, like we do have an aging population, and maybe you have a really accessible trail where some of these folks can access. I think there probably is funding in ways to have activities for these sectors of the population that really do need the health and well-being benefits, and mindful time on their local trail is a perfect way to do that. Peer support and building capacity. Glenn, did you want to speak to that at all?
Well, the peer support is something that we at CMHA we've just hired a peer support coordinator, so we're really trying to get into that and recognize that we don't have to always go to the experts. We're talking about mental health, the mental health care system. We know it's very difficult to access for some people. Financially, it's unattainable. So peer support is a means of kind of filling in some of those gaps. And I think thinking about nature and nature-based activities and that sort of thing, I think connecting those two, the idea of peer support and peer support in nature, can be, I think, a very powerful thing. And hopefully we'll be able to make some connections or be able to support some groups and do that in the future, right? So,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, really that idea of trying to pass on knowledge and equipping people to be able to, kind of train the trainer kind of a thing, where you can really help to develop capacity. So, I mean, that's me being here wanting to share this stuff with you folks. But maybe there's other ways that you can invite, people in your community to advocate and get involved in this. And I'm sure volunteer recruitment is an issue that you are always experiencing, but maybe a mental health lens onto your trail work is another way to get people involved, which leads to the community health boards and NGO groups. I've personally found that connecting these different interest groups and priorities between health, conservation, trails and recreation, local rec departments. I have that listed as well. A lot of these, and you're probably doing a lot of this already, but a lot of these groups and sectors have similar priorities. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting people at the table at the same time to say, hey, we can do all of this together. I think trails and parks and community natural spaces are talked about a lot in these sectors and saying how valuable they are. But maybe we're not always connecting the dots. So this is maybe just a prompt to recognize that a lot of these connections are almost already kind of made. We just have to tie the knot and kind of help things move forward.
I know you're going to talk about partnerships and that, but that's another thing that we are trying to really focus on and develop is the idea of partnering with other organizations who are doing similar work to us as an organization. A lot of not-for-profits, we rely on grants for a lot of the things we do, and there's a lot of pots of money out there, and if we can get together and combine them, that sometimes, like Will said, maybe a mental health group with a trails group, we can share some resources and maybe have a greater impact than if we're both trying to do our work separately. So yeah, I think that's something that we need to as a society focus on, I think, a little bit more in order to really start to see some change be made.
I'll speak to this specific project in a few more slides, but we recently created this forest and health workshop, and it was a kind of a collaboration between myself and my business and environmental organization Save Your Old Forests, and they were saying that while we find that governments, local and federal, provincial, local, federal governments don't always have a priority for the environment, but they always have a priority for health. So how can we think about weaving that in? We know that there's, there's kind of a health crisis between mental health and chronic physical health issues and aging. There's a lot of good that trails can be doing for these folks and these issues.
Yeah.
Might be able to skip over this. Local partnerships, really talking about this a lot.
Okay.
I found specific. Ooh, maybe for a sec, Glenn. Sorry.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
I think I'm said everything, but I don't think I have. I found examples of specific mental health hikes. So just a trail group is creating a hike for our mental health, and it might not be that complicated, but we're just going to go on a nature hike for our mental health. And again, it's just that explicit mentioning there. I included certified trails in this photo. So my association that I've trained with, the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, has a certified forest therapy trails program. So I think there's funding available, but there's definitely a lot of resource support, and you can get your trail registered as a certified forest therapy trail. This is something I'm deeply passionate about. So if there's anybody there who's interested in this, I'd love to help you out with that. Because it's an official kind of a program, I think there's a bit of a process to it, but I should mention too, I am the Atlantic representative for Nature and Forest Therapy Canada. And our board, our group is looking to help develop this as well. That's good, Glenn. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for indulging me.
No worries.
And just a few more examples of local, initiatives and projects and programs. This is a really beautiful trail in the Portapique area that was created after that mass shooting event. And Holly Carr is a local painter and author, and she created this beautiful book. And CMHA was a partner in this project. Mm-hmm. And they've made these really beautiful panels. Her book is very about mental health and just normalizing it and providing a space for normalizing and really comforting and working with that. But it is a very slow kind of mindful trail with lots of really beautiful artwork and signage. So a really neat example. But it was addressing a specific community challenge as well, which I think is really interesting and really special. This is if you've ever heard of the Healing Forests program. So this is a national project to establish and actually not protect, but recognize and identify healing values of forest. And there's a very strong kind of Indigenous perspective with this one as well. So this is there's 2 or 3 in Nova Scotia. I think 2 of them are in Unama'ki in Cape Breton. This one is in the Annapolis Valley, and this owner of this land had just decided he wanted to have his forest, his property, contribute to this Healing Forest program. So again, really weaving in, there's some truth and reconciliation bits to that as well, and I don't know enough about it, but it is focusing on, you know, healing and recovery and well-being through the land, which I think is great. This was the workshop I spoke of that I partnered with the NGO. So it was a forest bathing and nature-based wellness workshop. So I did some forest bathing. We had some yoga. There was a little bit of talking about old growth forests. This NGO was really interested in protecting more land for conservation. So I was really recognizing all those connections there. We charged a small fee. We had kind of hot drinks and snacks, but it was bring your own lunch. But it was a whole day. It was a Saturday. It was lovely. People had a really great time. And I think when folks are invited to learn, invited to collaborate and to socialize and connect, but also receive some health benefits and do a little bit of their own healing, it's pretty hard to not have, you know, satisfied customers at the end of the day. So it usually goes quite well. And just a kind of on a tangential thing, I'm a member of this Food Art Nature program. This is like a Annapolis Valley specific tourism initiative, and myself and other people in the community, a lot of them are farmers or herbalists. I did some archery with one of the new experience providers. It's really just thinking about immersive experiences. And the example of this night hike I went on last week was a great example. It was on the Harvest Moon Trail in the Annapolis Valley. Wasn't anywhere, you know, remote or secret or anything like that. But because it was at night and it was very invitational, the host was really, you know, inviting people to experience things in their own way. It was just a lot different than maybe your typical, you know, guided hike that's talking about, you know, maybe something that you've done before. Maybe this is just a kind of a new way to do it. And if there are local experts in your area, whether it's, you know, local plant medicines or wildlife or history or Mi'kmaq folks, being able to ask your community and your trail users, hopefully, to engage in that space in a different way, that's really you know, really fun and exciting and immersive. There's a lot of really strong value. People take a lot away from those experiences, and, you know, sometimes might, you know, donate or contribute financially in a significant way because it is really meaningful. And that's kind of the hope of this Food Art Nature project. And I'd be happy to talk more about that too. And this is just this is related to the Nova Scotia Walks program and this Make Your Move and Healthy Tomorrow group. This is Canadian based. They're just very much about getting outside and moving. So there's a lot of a strong physical health piece to that too. But there's some really great resources on their website. I think it'll be in our resource list. Sounds like, yeah, it would be. And yeah, they are connected to the NS Walks program, so you're probably familiar with that. But I wanted to just kind of remind and put that in there, because I do think between Hike Nova Scotia Walks, and these folks, there are already, you know, some good things happening in our community and some good resources to take advantage of, to really help bring that well-being and mental health to the fore when we're talking about using our trails.
So I think that brings us kind of to the end of our presentation. We'd like to get some interaction with you folks going, if possible. We have some questions here that we just wanted to kind of pose to you as discussion starters. So what we were wondering is what are some of the successes your group has had, and I guess we're talking regionally or community wise, depending on how you're divided. What are some of the challenges that you face? And maybe we can, if there are challenges that are brought up, maybe we can either discuss how you overcame them or maybe discuss solutions for said challenges. So I don't know if anyone wants to start. You can jump in on any of them.
This is really popcorn style, but hopefully through folks hearing some challenges that maybe somebody else in the room in the call here has some solutions there. But maybe you do have some successes that other folks can feel inspired by. Really just a chance to discuss together.
To build those partnerships that Will talked about a few minutes ago.
Yeah, while folks are thinking of their examples or their questions, I have a neat initiative that was I think was a pretty good success for Hike Nova Scotia. While we don't own or manage our own trail, we did partner with Melissa Labrador and the PEMSIC Conservation Mosaic, and she did a series of full moon hikes in the last year, which was really cool. And there was pretty good attendance for that. Like people were pretty jazzed, one, to go out at nighttime or at sunset, and then to be walking at night. That's always something that really draws people in. And then also just the interpretation around Mi'kmaq culture and language that she included as part of her walks. And so that was a really great way to engage people on some trails down closer to the Shelburne area, I think is where most of them happened. So that was pretty neat. And also I have found for in winter and snowshoeing and nighttime, those three, when they come together and the conditions are right, you get droves of people coming out to trails, and it's just such a magical experience. Anyway, just a few ideas.
Thanks, Janet. Yeah, that kind of speaks to the mixing it up and thinking about different ways, like different seasons, different activities, different people coming in. That's really cool.
Those nighttime walks sound really interesting. I've never done anything like that. It sounds like it would be really kind of a neat experience, because you're relying on some senses that we may not, your sense of hearing, which we may not rely on as much as vision, during the day. So I'll have to look for those.
It is. It's pretty neat. And I thought I saw Nadine coming on.
Yeah.
There she is.
Hi. Yeah, I found this really helpful and really interesting. I think what I found really helpful is to hear a few new ways to me to frame things, and I really appreciate that. So I'm a communication person. I'm a communication manager in my day job, but communication is really important to me personally too. And I always love new ways to frame things. And so I really appreciated that about how you frame things this evening.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadine. That's perfect. Any challenges out there? Are people having some questions or some sticky points that anyone else in the room might be able to help us out with?
I could jump in. And this is not a challenge, but just more of just a quick story about where we are with our trail system. So I'm I'm still considering myself relatively recent to the board at Coxheath Hills. For those who don't know, Coxheath Hills is just outside of Sydney in Cape Breton. So I've been there for about 2 years, and we are just actually last weekend, started a process of expanding our trail system. And that is partly going to be done through volunteer build. So we're going to have volunteers up on, cutting trail essentially. And as we were preparing for this, I think it was late last year, and we had a few people out who were participating on our trail crew committee. One of the participants mentioned this to me that it's not the goal, of course, is to make trails and engage people in nature and so forth. But the real beneficial outcome for the trail building itself is the building of community. And that sense of community and that sense of having things to do, to participate in your community, to do something productive, that has a lot of mental health benefits to it as well.
For sure.
And he is particularly referring to the Men's Shed project that I believe started out of Australia. And this is particularly about aging males' mental health, that they often experience loneliness and isolation and so forth. And so the Men's Shed project was simply getting men to build sheds. And through that process, giving them something to do, but also this sense of community and someone to talk to that they normally wouldn't do. Like the idea of that, one-on-one typical counseling works less with men than it does with women, apparently. So he was just kind of drawing that parallel to, and it's certainly not just men that are just building our trails, but that the idea of having that active participation in something as a project of building something is itself has a positive mental health outcome for it.
We sometimes get so absorbed in that activity that organically stuff starts to come out, and we start to have conversations, and it just sort of breaks down some of those inhibitions that some of us have when talking about mental health, right? And without even realizing it, we've come together to do this section of trail, but without realizing it, somebody might just inadvertently say something, and then our discussion begins, right? So I like that idea of that community building and just offering, because you're right, if you're having a discussion and that's the sole purpose of getting together, that looking and facing each other can be intimidating. But when you're working side by side on a common goal, that can often, we let our guard down a bit, so to speak, and are more open to have some of those deep and meaningful conversations, I find.
And it might not be something that, that's all, totally true. It might not be something that you advertise the trail building event as like, hey, this is going to be good for you. But if you can, make sure there's opportunities for people to feel really comfortable, and there's lots of time for chatting, and it's not like, crazy work party and there's no fun involved, just allowing folks to have those opportunities to chat and to maybe, form their own little groups and pair up with somebody and they're working on a different section, and just kind of letting that happen. That's really cool. I'm definitely going to check out the Men's Shed project. That's really interesting.
There's one in Berwick area, Will.
Okay, great.
I haven't been over to, Will and I live not too far from one another, so but I haven't been over to check it out. But it is something that I'd like to look into.
Awesome. It is 1 minute to 8, so technically we're supposed to be ending in a minute and sending you folks away. Now it's 8 o'clock. But before we leave, does anyone else have any reflections or questions or things they want to share here?
Quiet group. Quiet Tuesday
Yeah.
evening group.
Yes.
A
Well,
nice forum.
I just want to say I really love the idea of the immersive experiences, Will, that you described. And here I am always thinking of money these days. Talk about a fundraising idea for a specific trail system, right? Like to offer like a really enhanced, really beautiful experience for people and charging for it and it could turn into a bit of a fundraiser. On the flip side of that, you want to offer free and sort of, very accessible experiences as well. But, just from the fundraising side of things, it's a great way to bring that mental health slant to supporting your trail. So yeah, unless there's nothing else to ask or to comment on, I do want to thank Will and Glenn for walking us through all this amazing ideas. Yeah, my head's just like, oh yeah, we could do this. They could this, and it's lots of great ideas. So I'm gonna go back and review some of them and see what how we can act on some of these. But thank you so much for this. This is an important issue, and I think there's a bit of a lost opportunity. A lot of trail systems, there's so much potential, and it's just, it's just sort of taking that opportunity or grabbing that neat idea and just seeing where it can go. So hopefully folks have planted some seeds of ideas here that maybe they'll go on and act on. So we will follow up. So there is this recording will be available online in a couple of days, so you can come back and rewatch it. We will get the slides out to folks. We'll send some of those links out, and then we'll also send an part of all of this, all of that information will be in an email that'll come out in a day or two, and there'll be an evaluation link as well. So if you can just give us some feedback on the webinar. And then we do have one more on volunteer recruitment coming up. So that's May 21st. So please go and sign up for that. That's a key one. You can get your volunteers to run these events by going to that one. Get some good ideas. So unless there's nothing else, again, Will and Glenn, any parting words?
I just put up a slide with Will and my contact information if you have any questions or anything you want some feedback or help with. But I just want to say thanks for having us, and it's nice to see that you're focusing on mental health in all that you're doing, and just encourage you to keep doing great work. Will?
Yeah, and for me, I got familiar with trails. I worked with the Sackville Rivers Association, Sackville, Nova Scotia, and we did some trail building and got familiar with trail associations. And so I just, my work depends on recreation opportunities and trails and parks. So I just really appreciate the work that you're doing and hope that this was helpful. And yeah, definitely please reach out if you want to talk about anything more.
Great. Thanks again. Okay, everyone. Thanks and happy trails.
Okay.